This video is an introduction to Unit 1, Topic 2, Multicellular Organisms. Learning intention for this video is to recognize that multicellular organisms have a hierarchical structural organization of cells, tissues, organs, and systems. Let's start with unicellular organisms. So obviously a unicellular organism is a single cell. All prokaryotes are unicellular. Remember that a prokaryote is a cell that lacks membrane-bound organelles, such as a nucleus, or it could be mitochondria. There are also many eukaryotic single-celled organisms, so protists and fungi are single-celled. Well, some of those fungi are, such as baker's yeast. You can see over here these red cells. That's baker's yeast. We use those for baking and brewing, making alcohol. So you can actually have some eukaryotic cells that are unicellular. We've also got in the top right, you've got your gleaner over here. That's a eukaryotic unicellular protist. You can actually see some of the organelles within that cell itself. And then, of course, you've got, this is an example over here of E. coli. So it's a bacteria, it's a prokaryote, it lacks membrane-bound organelles, it's unicellular. And we've got, we have E. coli in the human gut, but you can get some types of E. coli that will actually make you quite sick. So a unicellular organism, it's a single cell. All eukaryotes are unicellular. You can also get some eukaryotic single-celled organisms. The unicellular organisms, they must carry out all the necessary functions to sustain life. And they'll rely on diffusion for the exchange of materials either in or out of the cell. So if they need to excrete wastes, it'll be through diffusion, or anything coming into the cell that will be done via diffusion. You think about a multicellular organism, which we're going to talk about in a second, they'll actually have specific organs and systems that will help exchange with the environment. If you're unicellular, you carry out all the necessary functions to sustain life. You don't have organs and systems assisting you with that. And you're also going to rely on diffusion to get things out of the cell and into the cell. Because of this reliance on diffusion, they're going to be microscopic in size to maintain a large surface area to volume ratio. So you guys will remember that your surface area to volume ratio is larger if you're a small organism. And that just increases the efficiency of transport in and out of the cell. Remember how cells can only get so big before that efficiency of diffusion becomes too low for them to sustain themselves? So anything that relies on diffusion, as these unicellular organisms do, they will have to be microscopic to maintain that large surface area to volume. Most reproduce asexually. Asexually is they don't have a partner, and you can see an example of that over here is what we call binary fission. So this is a simple prokaryote here. It duplicates its DNA, and then that cell, and this is the fission here, the binary fission, that cell divides to produce separate daughter cells. So it's asexual reproduction, and they can live independently, or if they're not happy with that, they can get together in colonies. You might even see them in biofilms. So that's not like a movie about biology. Biofilm is actually what you can see here on the surface of this pond here, the cyanobacteria. So this is a large colony of unicellular organisms. The green color is because it's a photosynthetic bacteria, so you can see the chlorophyll, the pigment in those cells. And that green scum or biofilm will actually form on the surface of the water. I wouldn't get in that pond if I were you, by the way, probably make you pretty sick. And of course, a colony, we're just looking at a group of organisms of the same species that live together. So let's now have a look at multicellular organisms. As the name suggests, it's pretty straightforward. Multicellular organisms are composed of many eukaryotic cells. You'll never find a prokaryote as a multicellular organism, well, not on Earth anyway. Up to trillions of cells make up a multicellular organism, such as ourselves, that are dependent on each other for survival. So unlike a prokaryote, who has to do everything for its survival, the cells in a multicellular organism will kind of depend on each other depending on what job they have. They'll be specialized at doing something and will rely on one of the other cells in the organism to do a job for it. So specialized cells in a multicellular organism have a specific structure that enables them to perform a particular function within the organism. And not just that, they perform it very well. They're specialized at doing one job really well. You kind of rely on the other cells in the body to do their job really well. And you can see over here, here's some examples of these specialized cells in a multicellular organism. You've got some reproductive cells here, bone cell for structure. I mean, you can see these different shapes here are very specific for whatever job it has. You have your nerve cell down here for transmitting messages. Epithelial cells, so that's any cell that is the barrier between the external environment and the internal environment of a multicellular organism, such as skin or the lining of your throat. We would call those epithelial cells, and you can see all these little hairs on top here. So this would be possibly the environment. Any ideas on what these little hairs are supposed to be doing? Hopefully someone got it there. It's just increasing surface area to volume ratio to make that diffusion or that transport from the environment into the organism itself a little bit more efficient. And you've got red blood cells here. Like a nucleus, they have iron, they carry oxygen, they're very small so they can fit into capillaries. The idea here is multicellular organisms, many eukaryotic cells, and they are specialized. You can see all of these examples here. Oh, and the muscle cells, I missed those ones as well. But all of these examples here, you'll find in a multicellular organism, and they are really good at doing one job and rely on all of the others to keep that organism and therefore those cells alive. So let's have a look at the hierarchy system here. And this may be a little bit of revision. You've probably done this in junior school as well. But the smallest structural and functional unit of an organism is the cell, or of life, really, when you think about cell theory. If we step down this hierarchy system here, we go from a cell to tissue. These are specialized cells that work together to perform a similar function. So you might have muscle tissue with muscle cells, for instance, or bones with bone cells, specialized cells working together. We keep moving down. After tissue, you'll find that you have an organ. You have specialized tissue. So we've gone from specialized cells making up a tissue. Now you've got specialized tissues that make up an organ, such as the heart. So you'll have the muscles of the heart, those specialized tissues making up the organ, and they also work together to perform one or more functions. Moving on, from organ, we have a system. So now we have several organs working together to perform a specific function. You think about any of the systems in your body. You've got the respiratory, you've got the circulatory, you've got the digestive, you've got the reproductive. They'll all have organs associated with each other that perform a larger function within the body, whether it be breathing, transporting oxygen, getting rid of wastes, moving, whatever it happens to be. Those organs will be working together to perform that function. And after system, you've got the organism in this hierarchy system. So hierarchy just means level. And in this case here, we're just looking at levels of complexity increasing. And finally, after you have, system, you'll have organism, which is a living thing. Could be multi, could be unicellular, depending on which system you're talking about. But the organism is a living thing composed of many systems keeping that organism alive. So we go from cell to tissue, to organ, to system, and finally to organism. That's our hierarchy system. Some people might prefer to draw this diagram here, starting with cell on the bottom and moving up, which demonstrates an increase in complexity as you move up. So either way you want to draw out this hierarchy system, it's up to you, as long as you have the system, this hierarchy system, in the correct order. Cell, tissue, organ system, finally organism. And here's two examples of this hierarchy system. It looks like we're moving from left to right here. So we're going from a specialized cell, tissue, organ system, and organism. So we start at the left here with our specialized cell. This is a muscle cell, which makes up muscle tissue. Those muscle tissues obviously make up the heart. It needs very strong tissues here in order to pump blood around the body. Those organs, among others, this heart, among other different organs, will actually make up the system, being the circulatory, and then multiple systems together obviously is what a human is composed of. So that's our hierarchy system there. Same deal for a plant, for instance. We're still going to go from specialized cell, tissue, organ system to organism. In this case here, we're looking at the root. So we have a specialized root hair cell. Remember, this shape here is to increase SA to V, surface area to volume. So this odd protrusion it has here is just to increase the surface area to volume ratio of that cell so it can get water and nutrients in a lot more efficiently. So root hair cell makes up root tissue, which obviously make up the roots of the plant. Now, the roots of the plant are part of the vascular bundles that make up the transport system, so the phloem and xylem that go up the stem, and those transport systems make up a large part of that plant. So again, specialized cell, to tissue, to organ, system, and organism. This is the hierarchical system or structure that makes up multicellular organisms. Let's have a look at some tissues in animals. There are 4 basic types of tissues in vertebrates. So vertebrate just means that you have a spinal column. You can have muscles, so muscle tissue, and they are cells that can contract. Muscles can't push, by the way. So anytime you want to move something in your body via muscles, well, a set of muscles will contract. Those muscle cells will contract. And you'll also need an opposing muscle that will actually return the arm, for instance, back to its original position. So none of your muscles push anything. It's only pulling. And you'll probably have 2, maybe more muscles that work in tandem, one to do the pulling in one direction and then one to pull the arm back or the leg back in the other direction. So you'll have muscle cells that can contract. Nerve cells, they'll sense stimuli. If it's a sensory neuron, they can transmit signals around the nervous system. Connective tissues, they'll support and connect structures of the body, so ligaments and muscles and tendons, for instance. And you've also got your epithelial cells, which we've mentioned before, which just cover internal and external surfaces such as skin. But it's basically the cells that meet the external environment, and that could be within your throat, for instance. It could be externally, like we've already said here, your skin. Here we have an awesome cat. Possibly my father, we're not too sure yet. But here we go, we've got some connective tissue, an example of being bone. We've got blood as well as a connective tissue. What else do we have? Muscle tissue, which is, again, one of our main types of tissue in a vertebrate. Skeletal muscle, smooth muscle in intestinal walls. And we have some epithelial tissues here. So we have the lining of the stomach is an epithelial tissue, so it's where the external environment, so to speak, meets the body. And here we go, we have some nerve tissues as well, so that would be the sensory nerves or the motor neurons, possibly, of the nervous system. So we've almost finished this little video here, and the last thing we're going to look at here is cell differentiation. Cell differentiation is the process by which unspecialized cells, and they're called stem cells, become specialized cells. Now, there's a video coming up that will actually look at stem cells in a lot more detail. But before we get there, let's just have a quick look at gene expression. And we're going to just talk about how do cells become specialized. How can they go from an unspecialized cell, something like a red blood cell or a bone cell or a sperm cell? All somatic cells, so a somatic cell is a cell within your body of an organism, contain the same genetic information. So this would not be your sex cells. A somatic cell would just be body cells apart from sperm and egg cells. So they contain the same genetic information. However, during the development of specialized cells, only some genes are expressed. So genes are a section of your DNA that code for a particular function, a particular protein, but not all of them. When we say gene expression, they're the genes that are actually read from the DNA and expressed and have some sort of function. For example, in developing red blood cells, genes for hemoglobin are expressed. So hemoglobin is the protein that carries oxygen. Now, if you're a bone cell, the gene in the DNA that expresses hemoglobin, that produces hemoglobin, obviously that's not going to be expressed. Depending on what type of cell you are, different parts of the genomic sequence will be expressed when they're starting to become specialized. So imagine a muscle cell full of mitochondria. Well, there's a gene in there that would increase the number of mitochondria that are produced when a muscle cell is beginning to specialize into that particular role. So how do cells become specialized? They all have the same genetic information to start with. However, during development, only some genes are expressed depending on what you are going to specialize in. And here's an example as we've already gone through. If you're going to develop into a red blood cell, the genes that carry oxygen, well, I shouldn't actually say that, the genes that produce hemoglobin, which carry oxygen, they'll be expressed, but obviously wouldn't be expressed if it was a nerve cell developing, for instance. So you have a look at this flow chart on the left, right, I apologize. You have the DNA sequence at the top here. Now a gene is a small section, so maybe from there to there. That would be a gene within the DNA. Now as they're starting to specialize, these cells from stem cells, proteins switch off some genes in that DNA. They're not expressed. Depending on what these cells will turn into, these proteins during development will switch off some genes. So in this case here, we switch off that particular gene as this stem cell is developing, and that would produce a muscle cell. And for example, over here, we switch off this section of the DNA. So this is expressed, and we would end up with a nerve cell.